League, and of course the big stage in the National Hockey League. She is an expert in her field, and I got to admit, I'm really excited to hear from you, so stay tuned for this. Lots of tips and tricks. I'll hand it over.
Good morning, everybody. How are we? Good? Good. Good? Ready to learn lots? Lots of tools for our toolbox, coaching toolbox. So my name is Margaret. I'm the lead performance dietitian here with the Maple Leafs. I take care of 75 hockey players right now. All different levels of hockey, but the messages that I'm going to share with you today are all the same. So I can't really reinforce how important nutrition is. 70% of your athlete's performance will be based solely on nutrition. There's 24 hours in a day. We are maybe training or we're on the ice for an hour to 2 hours a day. We might be in the gym. What are we doing the other 22 hours? Probably 10 of those hours we're spending eating, and the other 10 hours we're probably spending sleeping. So sleep and nutrition are imperative when it comes to your athlete's performance. And so for those of you who are taking notes, I want you to take your piece of paper out and I want you to draw a triangle on it, okay? Draw a triangle like this, and this is going to be my foundation, my nutrition principles for performance. So you draw your triangle, and we're gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4 tiers, okay? And as you move through the tiers are going to vary in sizes, right? Which is gonna be based on their importance. And so the very first tier at the bottom, so you've all had 3 lines through your triangle, the first one down there is general healthy eating. Making sure that we're getting enough vitamins, enough minerals, enough energy to support our athletes' growth, development, recovery, and overall health. So when we're missing something and we're lacking in a nutrient and we're really not getting that base proper, everything else that we could be doing for our performance is going to suffer. So make sure that you're eating the right foods, whole foods first, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, and have access to those. So that's the first base there. Once we have a player that has mastered general healthy eating, we're supporting their growth and their development, their energy levels, we don't have any general health concerns or anything like that, then we can move to the next tier. And the next tier there is cooking. It's food skills. How comfortable are we in the kitchen? How are we able to build meals for ourselves? We might have an athlete who is eating really well, he's got everything on the go, but then when it comes time to prepare a meal for himself, because sometimes we have busy parents, and he's got to be, he or she has to be responsible for what they put in their body. And if we want to prevent them from going or always relying on those fast food restaurants, we need to make sure that we teach them how to cook. How do they make a sandwich? I've worked with tons of 15-year-old hockey players, soccer players, doesn't know what to go in a sandwich, what breads to choose, what a protein source is, right? So we need those general healthy eating guidelines. What's a carb? What's a protein? How do we put it together in the kitchen? How do we put a meal together on our plate that's going to support our health and development? So once we have those cooking skills down, the next tier there is the sports nutrition principles, okay? So once we master our cooking, we know that we're eating the right foods in the right amounts. Now we can say, okay, what's my timing like? How's my recovery? What's my fluid intake, and what types of foods and times am I having those things? So when it comes to pre-game, pre-training, we know that our main source of energy is going to be carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are our main source of fuel. We're working with an anaerobic sport. We're not using any oxygen, which means we need to be using carbohydrates. So we can find carbohydrates in lots of different ways. And my one rule here, or not rule, but principle with before training is a 3-2-1 rule. So another thing that you can write down and take in your toolbox, 3 hours before a training session or a game, we're focusing on carbohydrates. We're providing ourselves with some lean protein. That protein is actually going to help stabilize our blood sugars, and it's going to prevent us from getting hungry. There's nothing worse than being hangry. Nobody makes friends when they're hangry. And so that protein is going to help keep us full, okay? And we can provide ourselves with a little bit of fruit there, a little bit of vitamins and minerals. That's 3 hours before. 2 hours before, Now we're starting to get closer to training time, we're starting closer to game time, and we want to focus more so on those carbohydrates and maybe a little bit of protein or something like that. I'm a very huge advocate of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I know there's a lot of allergies and this type of thing. You can always use a wow butter, which is a soy nut butter, or a seed butter if you want, but PB&J all the way, and that's even in the big leagues here. Everybody uses that. It's simple, it's basic, and it's also non-perishable, which is really important when it comes to putting a sandwich in our bag. If we're not really hungry, the nerves are getting to us, we have it at least for after the game, which is going to help with our refuel and our recovery. So 2 hours before, your carbs, maybe a little bit of protein. Not a whole meal, that's your 3 to 4 hours before. 1 hour before, we're just topping up blood sugars. We're just trying to keep ourselves alert, not hungry, give us some quick energy, and those are fast-acting carbohydrates. So those can be found in things like granola bars. I really like to use applesauce, or those applesauce pouches. A nice trick there, especially when you're training and you're coming in off the ice and your body temperature is quite high. If you keep your applesauce pouches in the fridge or in the freezer and you make it kind of like a slushy, it really helps decrease your core body temperature. And it makes it a lot more tasty, especially versus the room temperature applesauce. Pretzels, bananas, obviously those quick and easy carbohydrates 1 hour before. And those 1 hour before foods, you can use in between periods as well. So make sure you have those whole foods on hand versus anything else. So that's my 3, 2, 1 before and during. Recovery afterwards, there's no substitute for poor recovery. If you're gonna have an athlete that is doing everything wrong, which we do, we have those players, the most important thing that they need to work on and they need to master is their recovery and their ability to bounce back, because if they're playing back-to-back games, that bounce back's super important, and if they're playing back-to-back games over a weekend tournament, there's no substitute for poor recovery the night before the next game, and how quickly they're recovering after their first game, okay? So with recovery, protein to repair, rebuild lean muscle, we want to refuel and replenish with those carbohydrates, rehydrate with fluids and electrolytes that are lost through sweat. And the fourth R here, which is very important that a lot of people kind of hide by the wayside, is the revitalize. And revitalize is through vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Because as we are training, as we are performing, and we're exercising, we are creating stress in our body. And if we're training a lot or there's a lot of volume, our immune system will suffer. And if we're not providing our body with antioxidants and vitamins and minerals, we're more likely to get sick. We know that in a team sport, if one player gets sick, everybody's going to eventually get sick. So that revitalized piece in the recovery process is imperative. So that's your sports nutrition principle there, okay? Now that's your third tier. We got everything down, we're eating whole foods, we know how to cook, we can put some good food on our plate, we're comfortable in the kitchen, we know what to do at the grocery store, we're applying our sports nutrition principles. That tiny, tiny little peak of that triangle is supplements. And that's the only way and the only time that supplements come into play is when we've mastered that entire foundation. Because if you're not eating right, your timing is off, you can't put a meal together, or you're not giving yourself access to the right food, there's no supplement in this world that is going to make you a better hockey player. And that needs to be the main message to a lot of our athletes, because in the industry that we're working in, especially in the nutrition industry, that triangle, take a look at it, and it's inverted. And everybody is promoting supplements like it's the basics. In terms of nutrition principles, that is essentially all you need to know to start guiding yourselves as role models, as coaches, and also to address any nutrition needs that your players may have. So I want to open this up to Q&A, because nutrition